Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Suzanne Stutman. I am a professor emeritus from Penn State University and the first vice president of EHAN. I'm going to read to you today a poem called A Prayer for the Girl Child, and it is my hope that this poem, as well as all of the poems that I have written, can bring some kind of peace to the world. A prayer for the girl child. When I grow up, please let me be safe. Learn to read and write. Live with my parents and my brothers and sisters. Not be sold to work as an indentured servant or a sex slave. Have enough food and clean water to enable me to have a healthy body and soul. Keep my sexual organs intact and not mutilated. Allowed to love and marry the person of my choice. Enabled to keep the children that I bear and to bear as many as I choose. When I grow up, may I discover a world populated by all who honor peace and one another. When I grow up, may we all be at peace. Thank you.
My name is Gabrielle Caspar. I'm a board member of IHAN and past president of the Medical Women's International Association. I'm a gynecologist and an educator who cares and is passionate about women's health and human rights, and have a particular interest in violence against women. My topic is violence against women, the ultimate gender inequality. Today I will discuss violence against women, not because it is more important than violence against men or children, elderly, disabled citizens, people of various race, religion, culture, skin color. No, not at all, but just simply because this parallel event should have taken place at the Commission on the Status of Women. So today I will limit my discussion to violence against women. UN Women describes violence against women and girls as a pervasive human rights violation of pandemic proportions. According to the WHO, and several global surveys suggest half of all women who die from homicide are killed by their current or former husbands or partners. In the United States and Australia, 1/3 of women murdered each year are killed by intimate partners. Citing available country data, UN Women estimate that as many as 70% of women experience physical and sexual violence during their lifetime, the majority occurring at the hands of husbands, intimate partners, or someone else the woman knows. An estimated 150 million girls under 18 suffer some form of sexual violence each year, and as many as 1 in 4 women experience physical and/or sexual violence during pregnancy. Based on World Bank data, the UN concludes that women aged 15 to 44 are more at risk from rape and domestic violence than from cancer, motor accidents, war, and malaria combined. In Victoria, in Australia, partner violence accounts for 7.9% of the overall disease burden among women of reproductive age. And this is larger health risk than factors like raised blood pressure, tobacco use, and increased body weight. Let's look at some specific examples. Women and girls comprise 80% of the estimated 800,000 people who are trafficked annually. Gender-based violence is also increasingly used as a weapon of war, and this includes rape. Rape is cheaper than a bullet. Sexual slavery, genital mutilation, forced pregnancy, forced abortion, forced sterilization. These acts, which violate international human rights and humanitarian law, are often used to achieve military or political objectives in situations of armed conflict. Harmful cultural practices are also an enormous issue. Termination of the female fetus, killing female babies, female genital mutilation, child brides. In India, approximately 22 women are killed each day in dowry-related murders, straight out of violence against women due to beliefs in family honor and sexual purity, ideologies of male sexual entitlement. And then, if it hasn't begun at one end, it goes through to the other. The last one, torture of the widows, especially in India and in Nigeria. Houston, for the Americans on board today, Houston, we have a problem. Violence against women is a pervasive human rights violation of pandemic performance. Violence against women, including sexual violence, is recognized as a serious crime, a serious social issue, and a serious human rights issue. We have an honorable challenge to prevent violence against women. Taking up this challenge is not a charity, but a unique responsibility. The challenge is enormous. Death to violence against women, and long live IHAN and all the NGOs and all the men and women who believe violence against women is the ultimate gender inequality, and the time for action is now.
Hello, I'm Marcy Kahn, and I'm very glad to be with you this evening to discuss New York's new criminal law, the Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act, which employs a trauma-informed approach to sentencing survivors of domestic violence. I can tell you that from my work as a former prosecutor and former judge in the New York trial and appellate courts, I saw these individuals, overwhelmingly female, who were arrested, tried, and sentenced for crimes committed at the behest of their domestic partner abusers. Through the National Association of Women Judges, I was able to work with a coalition of community leaders and survivors in helping to push for this new law. First, some background. In the United States, we disproportionately imprison women residents. We have 5% of the world's women living here, but we imprison 32% of the world's incarcerated women. In the state of New York, 94% of women in prison had experienced some sort of violence during their lives, and 3/4 of them had experienced domestic partner abuse. The U.S. Health and Human Services Department Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration recognizes that trauma is a health problem. Now, what do they mean by trauma? Trauma results from an event or circumstances experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Certainly, domestic abuse creates trauma with its lasting adverse health effects, including on individuals, again, mostly women, who are driven to commit crimes by their abusers. The good news is that we can address trauma if our delivery of services realizes the impact of trauma, recognizes the symptoms of trauma, bases our policy and program response on that knowledge, and resists re-traumatization. New York's new DV sentencing law uses this approach to achieve traditional as well as trauma-informed sentencing of criminal defendants who are survivors of domestic violence. This wheel shows how trauma-informed decisions by the court help reintegrate the offender into society. Traditional notions of sentencing, that's the orange ring, are enhanced by recognition of the effects of the domestic violence in traumatizing the defendant. That provides for a better reintegration. The New York law is unique in the United States. It has two parts, one relating to sentencing in new cases and the other relating to cases that were finished earlier, and offers resentencing there if the offender remains incarcerated and is serving a sentence of at least 8 years. In both parts of the law, the court is permitted, upon a satisfactory showing, to exercise its discretion to impose a more lenient sentence than would otherwise be required under our sentencing law. To obtain this relief, the defendant, through her appointed counsel, makes an application for a hearing before the judge, where the prosecutor may oppose the application. The judge then makes a ruling giving reasons. To qualify for relief, the defendant must demonstrate that she meets these three eligibility factors: that she was, at the time of the crime, the victim of substantial domestic abuse as shown by objective evidence, that the abuse significantly contributed to her criminal acts, and that under the circumstances, a traditional sentence would be unduly harsh. Now, this law was enacted just a year ago, and we are still in the very early stages of applying it. I do not have trends or anything like that to discuss with you tonight. We are just now training both judges and lawyers on the operation of the law and on trauma-informed sentencing. But what I can tell you is that it would not have been possible to achieve this law without a decade-long effort of dozens of community groups and returning survivor citizens coming together to work for its adoption. I thank you for your attention, and I send a big thank you to my colleagues who contributed to this presentation and to the passage of the Act.
Hi, I'm Lillian Dooley and I'm a fourth-year law commerce student at Deakin University. I'll be talking about the free legal services available to women survivors of violence in Australia. Legal aid commissions deliver an extensive variety of legal services in criminal, family and civil law matters. Some legal support is provided free of charge, including through brochures, information meetings or mobile legal advice. Although legal aid does provide help to many individuals, in order to be eligible for funding or legal representation, you must gratify the means and merits test and meet the applicable Legal Aid Commission guidelines. However, many people do not satisfy the means and merits test but cannot afford legal representation. This is where not-for-profit organisations are of great assistance. Women's Legal Services Australia is a national network of community legal centres that focus on women's legal matters. Their mission is to endorse a legal system that is safe, supportive, non-discriminatory and receptive to the needs of women accessing justice. Member organisations are available in every state throughout Australia. Individual member centres advocate for law and policy that respects and also promotes the rights of women. Community legal centres can provide free legal help to people, including women survivors of violence, in their dedicated area. West Justice, a CLC located in the western suburbs of Melbourne, have specialised family law and family violence legal clinics that focus on improving the safety of women and children in Melbourne's west. They can assist women survivors of violence in obtaining intervention orders, safe housing and trauma support. They also assist with projects such as early intervention and high-risk family violence training and drafting law reform submissions to do with family violence. A community legal centre I have personally volunteered at, Flemington and Kensington Community Legal Centre, also have a great focus on improving women's survivors of violence access to justice. They assist women in obtaining IVOs as well as varying the conditions. They also can assist women and children in making a victims of crime application where they can receive compensation and free psychological assistance from the state if a crime was committed against them. They can assist in helping victims recover from a crime by providing financial assistance for expenses incurred or reasonably likely to be occurred as a direct result of the crime. Conclusively, all Australian women have access to free legal resources through legal aid, but not everyone qualifies to receive funding for legal representation. Not-for-profit organisations are able to assist women experiencing violence so that they are able to be safe in their community. Thank you.
I bring you warm greetings as the president of the Medical Women's International Association. And I just want to thank IHAM, the School of Medicine Sydney, and Fordham Institute for Women and Girls for inviting me. My topic today is Harmful Cultural Practices, a Global Solution. So what are harmful practices? They are any and all practices in every sphere, including public, private, virtual, and online domains that exclude, restrict, impair, or nullify the fundamental human rights and equality of human beings. And today, we're talking about harmful practices again as a violence against women and girls. And therefore, I want to start out with something that I've been working on with my NGO in Nigeria, the Widows Development Organization. In 1995, I came across harmful practices against widows being perpetrated and realized that widows were being dehumanized, marginalized, and blamed for issues, for example, around witchcraft. These accusations happen in Tanzania, Ghana, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, as well as Nigeria. They undergo disinheritance of their property that belongs to themselves and their husbands, but it's taken away when their husbands die. There are cleansing practices where the widow is forced to be cleansed either in a river or she is raped as a means of cleansing. The widow may be forced to be married by the next surviving male, and that's the levirate. We also have issues around forceful shaving of the hair on the head, etc. So these are some of the practices, but I am happy to say that after 25 years of working to change laws locally, we have been able to empower widows. I just want to share with you the fact that several years ago, I had the opportunity of working with Professor Gay Casper, and Professor Gay Casper, through the Medical Women's International Association, was one of those who encouraged me. And there we are in 2001 and 2013 with support for the Widows Development Organization. Today, widows are not victims. They are survivors thriving. And here you have them in the community with a village savings and loans training. And here you have them celebrating their own mill, where they have a palm oil mill. Having said that, widowhood practices is just one of several harmful practices. You know, a lot of us know about female genital mutilation or female genital cutting. Less known about, for example, is breast ironing, a situation where girls in their puberty have hot stones or hot iron pressed on their breasts to stop the breasts from maturing so that they look more like men or boys and less likely to be abducted in the Boko Haram war. This is going on as we speak in northern Cameroon. There are issues around early marriage, for example, where girls are married early, as sometimes children at the age of 9 who are married early. And then there are the issues around infertility. Such a high premium is put on fertility that women now culturally, in a harmful way, go and pay a dowry on a young girl who they then present to their husbands to help to bring children into the family. So going back to widows, it's important to, therefore, not to look at widows only in the context of the elderly. Because of early marriage, we have child widows. Because of conflicts, we have conflict widows. We have half widows who are wives of the disappeared. We have widows of epidemics like HIV, AIDS, and Ebola. And therefore, when you look at issues right now, we are going through the pandemic because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I put it to you that we really have a pandemic within a pandemic, because we have violence against women and girls as a pandemic intersecting with the COVID-19 pandemic. And there are increased reports. We are looking now for concrete and verified data, but we do have reports from communities out of Kenya, for example, that there are increased child marriages due to economic oppression, increased female genital mutilation due to reduced availability of human rights defenders who would otherwise be in the communities. I bring you a global solution. I wear another hat as the founding co-chair of a global movement that is advocating for a global treaty to end violence against women and girls. Having worked in Nigeria, I know that laws can bring about change if they are implemented. Yes, implementation still remains a problem, but in order for us to bring about that global change, we need to make sure that we have laws, global norms that will change these practices in the same way that the Tobacco Treaty has changed the narrative from "it is my right to smoke" to "it is my right to breathe clean air." We need to train and retrain the responders, physicians like myself, lawyers, judges, the police, to respond to cases where we have violence, especially harmful traditional practices. We also need to make sure that there are appropriate shelters and safe spaces where those who are undergoing these harmful practices can be protected, where we can look after their mental health. We need to make sure that there's prevention education. It's not just a cliche that prevention is better than cure. How can we prevent those who are the perpetrators, our men, our boys, community leaders? How can we bring the prevention education to them? How can we ensure that there is targeted, ring-fenced budgeting? We need funding that is specific to ending violence against women and girls, and in particular, harmful practices. Dear friends, we can raise our voices. We can be that voice for the voiceless. Let's tell the story. Let's come together. Let's band together. I urge you to sign the global treaty to bring an end to all forms of violence against women and girls, including harmful practices. Please go to the website, everywoman.org. Thank you for listening.
Good afternoon. I'm Beatrice Goodwin, and I want to talk with you about femicide in Latin America, the ultimate violence. Femicide has a number of definitions that vary in usage and subsequent punishment. Femicide is quite simply murder of a woman due to gender conflict. As contrasted with homicide, more clearly denoting men, femicide has had a checkered impact on the perceived seriousness of the crime and how it may be investigated and prosecuted. For many, introduction to femicide came via Mexico. Juarez, just across the border from El Paso, Texas, welcomed a migration of up to 60,000 women a year because factories provided work there. Many of the women were murdered, often going to or from work. Bodies were often mutilated, dismembered, grossly defiled. The Juarez tragedy was years in duration. We must take note that NGOs, especially larger ones, can take on companies as well as countries to protect human rights. Juarez was helped in its solution for its notorious problem with such action. NGOs of lesser size and resources could well exert power by joining together with well-defined objectives. Femicide, though defined as a crime, often enjoys impunity both from investigation and prosecution. Both the crime of violent attacks and frequent impunity are thought to be rooted in patriarchal, machista, or sexist cultures and the desire to sustain patriarchal power relations. The hierarchical system of power between men and women is understood as the main determinant of femicide. 3 Central American countries, Honduras and Guatemala, constitute one of the world's most violent regions. El Salvador has the highest rate of violence outside a war zone. A woman is murdered there every 18 hours. The murder of women in Guatemala has tripled since the year 2000. In Argentina, a beach resort city has a bustling prostitution trade as well as many femicides. Prostitution enjoys robust police protection. The perspective of such guardians considers prostitution a legitimate form of work. Trafficking of women is also involved in this endeavor. Femicide in Mexico is only one of the criminal activities challenging life of its citizens. In 2018, 3,580 women were killed in Mexico. 98% of those deaths were patriarchal. This year, 100,000 women marched to Mexico's city's Zocalo and to begin 2 days of nationwide rallies focused on the national emergency of femicide and violence against women. After 50 years of civil war in Colombia, there is still a struggle with curtailing the violence related to cartels and the production of addictive drugs. Yet the Colombian population remains resourceful and hopeful. Women of Latin America are learning more about their rights as humans and as women, and working hard for a better life. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sarah Forsyth.
And I'm Anna Maria Kmanowitz.
We are 30 medical students from the University of Notre Dame in Sydney. And we're speaking today on the importance of teaching medical students, our future doctors, about violence against women. We're focusing on intimate partner violence here, IPV, and we would like to share with you how this is incorporated into the curriculum at our university. IPV is a prevalent and pervasive problem in Australia, as it is globally. In Australia, 1 in 6 women have experienced physical or sexual IPV. 1 in 4 women have experienced emotional IPV. And distressingly, 1 woman every week, on average, is murdered by their current or ex-partner. IPV is a major public health issue and may result in significant adverse physical and mental health outcomes for women and also their children. In order to make progress on the Sustainable Development Goals and promote good health and well-being and gender equality, then we need to take the issue of IPV seriously. As future doctors, we will see women who have experienced IPV. For many women, a doctor is the first and only way of disclosing and accessing support. However, many do not disclose, and this silence may be from fear, shame, embarrassment, or denial, or simply not recognising their situation as abusive. Research tells us that women are more likely to disclose IPV if they have been asked, believed, listened to without judgment, and supported in their decision-making moving forwards. And doctors are more likely to ask about IPV if they have undergone training, have increased awareness of the issue, and have knowledge of the supports available. Training medical students, our future doctors, will increase opportunities for women with IPV to be asked and to receive the support that they need.
There are a myriad of barriers to IPV training for future doctors. This includes lack of time in the course, lack of resources, funding, or faculty commitment, assumptions that the content will be covered elsewhere, or not perceiving it as a medical problem. Studies conducted in Australia and the UK have identified that junior doctors receive little to no training on intimate partner violence during medical school. Only 2 of 15 Australian medical schools have implemented comprehensive IPV programs in their curriculum, including an integrated advocacy-based approach. Notre Dame is a university that takes a pedagogical approach with training embedded into the curriculum through exposing students to IPV, sexual assault, and non-accidental injury. This is through lectures responding to survivors of IPV and sexual violence facilitated through sexual assault services, and violence against women taught through workshops that facilitate care for survivors of sexual assault. In their final year of training, students have tutorials that address reasons why women fail to present to police after abuse, how pregnancy is a high-risk time for IPV, and place emphasis on how to take a sensitive history and examination, which is taught and then reinforced through clinical years. Students are also taught how to implement safety plans and what services are available for the protection of victims and their families. We leave you with a slide of quotes from future doctors who have received this training. Exposure to IPV and sexual assault training prior to entering the health workforce gives us the appropriate awareness considering the prevalence and seriousness of the problem. Thus, we advocate strongly for the inclusion of IPV and sexual assault training to be embedded in the medical curriculum. It is more than just women's health. It is holistic, patient-centered care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nikki Raftopoulos as our next person for asking questions. I'm very, very, very sorry, but we're really, really running late. And I'm wondering, Nikki, if you could just give one, I think you've got a lot that have come through, but maybe just one for Marcy Khan and just one for Eleanor. Thank you.
Sure, no worries. If you can hear me, just give me a bit of a wave. Great. So thank you to all speakers for your wonderful talks. The first question is for Justice Khan. You spoke about objective evidence. So what sort of objective evidence would be required to make a defendant eligible for relief under the statute?
Well, it really can't be just the say-so of the defendant. That is insufficient. Various types of objective evidence are acceptable. The statute doesn't limit it, it just refers to objective evidence. But for example, a police report that is relatively contemporaneous with the commission of the offense would be an objective piece of evidence. A doctor's report or a doctor's chart that might have documented whether the offender patient had been forthright about how she got to be injured or not. But if the doctor's working hypothesis is that she was the victim of domestic violence, or as you in Australia call it, intimate partner violence, that could be in a medical record that could be used. This is much easier, of course, for the sentencing cases, the cases that are new and open now, than it is for the resentencing cases where some of the offenders have been incarcerated for 15 years already, and they would have to go back and get a contemporaneous piece of objective evidence. A witness statement could ostensibly qualify.
Thank you, Justice Khan. Sorry we don't have time for more questions. I now have a question for Dr. Nwanobi. Could you tell us a little bit more about Boko Haram, and is it still active?
Thank you. Yes, sadly, Boko Haram is still very active in Nigeria at the moment. In fact, just in the last 2 weeks, we had, a really terrible attack, and their tactics sadly are changing. Whereas, we had a faction of Boko Haram that were, targeting security sector personnel. Now we have the tactic where they are attacking more of civilian populations. And as you can imagine, it's the women and girls that, are the most vulnerable in this. And just to raise the issue, as I spoke about widowhood and harmful practices is that because of the child now have widows, and I'm sure that, our colleague from UNICEF will also tell you that we are also having issues of children bearing children to Boko Haram. And sadly, there is a high level of stigma regarding the forced wives of Boko Haram, and an even higher level of stigma regarding children born to Boko Haram. So we have a broad spectrum of challenges regarding violent conflict.
Eleanor, we just lost you. Thank you very, very, very much.